Let me start this video off with a question. How do you store your precious photos? If you're anything like me, you have hordes of hard drives and solid state drives laying around with hundreds of thousands of photos over the years on them, plus spares to use as backups. And this method works, I guess, but it's so disorganized and it makes it such a headache to find certain photos or footage. And if you want to use a different computer, you would need to plug everything in somewhere else. And while the speeds of modern solid state drives allow for super fast transfer speeds and the ability to easily edit off of the drive, compared to hard drives, the cost per terabyte is much, much higher. So you have to sacrifice speed for storage space, leading to frustration with time spent waiting for images to load and, the difficulty when, figuring all this kind of stuff out, and then you need to... All of these compromises and frustrations vanished the day that I got a NAS. Today, I'd like to talk about probably the best investment that I ever made for my photography career, and it's not even camera related. This black box right here is my Synology DS923 Plus, and in this video, I'll go over why I picked this particular NAS, my setup, and how it has changed my life, and why it may or may not be right for you. Now, NAS stands for Network Attached Storage, and as the name implies, it's a box of hard drives that can connect to the network and is accessible anywhere in the world. Think about it like your own personal Google Drive, except provided that you plug it in via a 10 gigabit local connection, you get speeds as fast as plugging in a fast solid state drive, but with capacities that are leaps and bounds larger than even the biggest solid state drives, and with redundancy should a drive fail, as well as a host of other awesome features that I'll touch on a little bit later. See, unfortunately, hard drives fail. And it's not a matter of if, but when. So if you aren't already making multiple backups of your work, start doing it now. I recently learned this the hard way. I had one of my very, very early hard drives fail, taking with it all of my early work. But thankfully, I'd actually made a backup about 4 years ago that meant that I actually ended up losing nothing. But it's a really important reminder that even when not in use, a mechanical hard drive really has a lifespan of at most 10 years. So definitely keep that in consideration, as it is not a viable method of long-term preservation. But buying lots of little drives, especially since I started to make these YouTube videos and as such started using a lot more space, is very, very disorganized. It's unsustainable, expensive, and very, very inconvenient, which is where the DS923 Plus comes in so handy. So inside of this little black box, I have 3 18 terabyte hard drives, giving me a total of 36 terabytes capacity, with space for 1 extra drive to add some more storage in the future. But hang on, wait, you said 3 times 18. Isn't that 54? Shouldn't there be 54 terabytes of storage in there? Well, yes and no. So while there is 54 terabytes worth of storage in like raw drive size, due to the type of RAID array that I have the drive set up in, which is called SHR or Synology Hybrid RAID, it actually allows for 1 drive to be used as a redundancy. So if one of the drives fail, I can still recover all of my data. There are a bunch of different RAID types out there, and I'll put them all on the screen for you just to have a look at. Personally, I would not be using any that don't have any kind of redundancy whatsoever. I think that it's really important that you just have at least 1 drive redundancy. You might not need to go too crazy and mirror the entire thing, because I feel like that's a little bit overboard, but definitely I think RAID 5, or if you go with Synology, their Synology Hybrid RAID, I think is a really good option to pick. And redundancy isn't actually the only great thing about this particular style of RAID array. The other great benefit is the data transfer speed of all the drives together. See, with just 2 drives, the speed is slow, which is around 150 megabytes per second transfer speed, which is okay, but it can get very, very laggy for video, especially if you want to edit directly off of the NAS. But once you add 3 drives, all of a sudden the speed is closer to 350 to 450 megabytes a second, which is almost as fast as a plugged-in USB solid state drive. Now, with 4 drives, the speed would be even quicker, but unlike many photography YouTubers, I didn't receive any of this stuff for free. I didn't even reach out to any companies to ask for, like a review in it or anything. I've wanted an NAS for a very long time, and I spent a very long time researching all this kind of stuff, what would work, what wouldn't work for me. And this is just the option that I picked that was sort of within my budget. And as such, that's just what I'm sharing with you guys today. And in this video, I'd like to go into a deep dive on just how I managed to get such excellent performance, what hardware I think is worth getting, and upgrades that I think are absolutely worth doing from the get-go. One thing that I'm not going to be covering in this video is the initial setup and the configuration of a NAS, as there is an excellent video by the YouTube channel SpaceRex that covers it perfectly, which I will link in the description, and it's what I actually followed to get up and running. He explains it so much better than I could. He's like a consultant and stuff too, so his channel is a real treasure trove of knowledge for NAS stuff. This is more just like my experience, talking about what kind of hardware I picked and how it has really helped me and my business. So let's first talk about what NAS you should get. Now, there are a few different options on the market with fairly intuitive plug and play solutions from companies like Synology, QNAP, and recently Ugreen has also started making NASs. I know a lot of people are getting sponsored by them and they're promoting them and stuff like that. They do look pretty good. A lot of them actually have 10 gigabit ports as well, which is actually really cool. I kind of wanted to go with Synology because it's tried and true and tested, but they make a lot of NASs, right? And at the time, like when I first started looking into this, I had no idea what was worth getting. Like, do I get one with a lot of RAM? Do I get one with, because you have to remember, it's basically like a small computer. That's all it is. A small computer with a bunch of hard drives plugged into it. And I wasn't sure. I was like, okay, well, do I get something that's like really powerful? Like, am I going to need that? And truthfully speaking, like I haven't really upgraded this NAS at all. So it has the 4 gigabytes of RAM that it comes with, and I've never really actually used any more than I think 60% utilization of that. And I haven't got an NVMe cache, an NVMe SSD cache in there either, even though I know a lot of people say that's a good thing to do. I imagine it would slightly speed up performance, but honestly, the 10 gigabit connection was really the only thing that made a really noticeable improvement. I probably will add some SSD cache into it in the future. For now, I'm happy with how it is at the moment. And also, before we go any further, be sure to subscribe to see more great photography content. So, for starters, I would strongly suggest avoiding any 2-bay NAS units. So one of the biggest plus sides of a NAS is the speeds that you can achieve, and seeing as the fastest mechanical drives are capped at 250 megabytes a second, unless you're willing to sacrifice all redundancy to achieve double that speed, you would also be stuck at these transfer speeds forever. Realistically, probably closer to 150 megabytes a second, as not a lot of those, I don't actually know of any 2-bay units that have 10 gigabit connection. And on a gigabit connection, you can't go faster than 125 megabytes a second. So if you plan on editing video off your NAS, or doing anything that requires fast transfer speeds, don't get a 2-bay. It's not worth it. For this reason, I would really strongly suggest going with a 4-bay or honestly even a 5-bay option. But because my budget didn't really allow for anything larger, I settled for the DS923 Plus. Now, Synology also have the DS1522 Plus, which is a 5-bay option. It's an excellent choice and would be probably my recommendation if you can work it into your budget. It's around about $400 more than the 923, 400 Australian more than the 923. But you just have to remember as well when you're buying this, that the NAS is not the most expensive part of this whole sort of operation. The hard drives themselves are very, very expensive. The 18 terabyte drives that I have in this unit were about, I think, $500 or $600 a piece. So, if you have to buy 4 of them, it starts to cost quite a lot. So that's something that you really need to remember. And it gets fairly expensive fairly quickly, especially once you start doing like 10 gigabit upgrades and stuff. But if you're a working professional, it will pay for itself with the ease of use and peace of mind in no time. One thing to remember as well, you can also purchase an expansion unit called the DX517 that adds an additional 5 drives to your NAS, so don't feel like you won't have any room to grow in the future should you choose a 4-bay option. So now that you have your NAS, you need to populate it with some drives. Now, at first I was considering just filling the entire unit up with small drives, and while that would give you the fastest possible speeds, it would also mean that you wouldn't really have much room to grow going forward. So for this reason, I think leaving at least 1 slot free is a good way to go. So get 3 drives if you have a 4-bay unit, or 4 drives with a 5-bay. That way you still get great speed, but you're also future-proofing your system. Or if you can afford it, honestly, just go fill out the whole thing with the highest capacity drives that you can get. I think the highest you can get is 22 terabytes at the moment. So I think a 4-bay unit with 4 22 terabyte drives in it would be enough for most people. I would be really surprised if you would fill that up. I mean, I don't know how much video you guys are shooting, but That's a lot of space. That's a lot of space. And you also get the fastest possible speeds that way. Now, as for the capacity and the drive type, I'm using the Seagate Exos Enterprise drives due to their excellent price per terabyte. They're actually some of the cheapest options available, and since they're actually designed to be used in an enterprise environment, they offer excellent reliability with 2.5 million hours as their kind of sort of guideline of how long they're meant to last for. However, one thing that is a massive drawback is just how loud they are. So especially with 3 of them riding at once, it can actually become very distracting if your NAS is located somewhere you can hear it. Mine is in my living room, as that is unfortunately the location of my internet connection, and I couldn't really put it anywhere else, but you just have to kind of live with it, I guess. One thing to remember as well with the SHR RAID type is that while you can easily add an extra drive in and expand your storage pool, firstly, the drive must be equal or larger than the biggest drive in your current system. So for me, 18 terabytes or higher. And another thing to remember is this is not a quick procedure. I remember putting the third drive, I bought a third drive and I put it in thinking, oh, you know, I'll be able to use it in like half an hour. It can take like 3 to 4 days to fully integrate that much extra storage into the pool. So account for that before thinking it's as simple as plugging it in and having it work. And you won't be able to reach those speeds until it's finished. So if you want the fastest speeds possible from the very beginning, put all 4 drives in or populate the entire unit. And then have it set up, and then that way you'll get the fastest speeds pretty much from the get-go. Now that you have your drives and you've put them all into your NAS and everything's good to go, let's talk about the importance of a 10 gigabit connection and why you may or may not need one. Now, standard network speeds are 1 gigabit, which is 125 megabytes. And most entry-level NAS units available will ship with a gigabit port, and the Ethernet port on the back of your PC is likely a gigabit port too. And this is fine for, you know, if you just want to stream movies or you want to use it as like a basic file server and stuff like that. But if you want to use this thing for more than that, and you want to actually edit off of it, and I mean edit 4K video off of it, you will honestly absolutely need a 10 gigabit connection. It is without question you will need one. If you want Lightroom to load fast, like if you want photos from the NAS to load quickly, 10 gigabit is absolutely crucial as well. I would not use a NAS without a 10 gigabit connection personally. And while Synology does actually sell NAS units that have 10 gigabit built in, they are quite a lot more expensive and they're also quite a lot larger. I think they might have a 6-bay that has 10 gigabit, but I'm not quite sure off the top of my head. Now, 10 gigabit is, as the name implies, 10 times faster than gigabit. So you get theoretical max speeds of 1.25 gigabytes per second. And like I said, I think it's one of the most important parts of making a NAS a viable option for professionals. And while it's fairly expensive, you can do it for not too much money if you're just using one computer with the NAS itself. I went with a slightly unconventional and very overkill setup, which I will explain shortly, but basically you need to buy one of these Synology 10 gigabit adapters, stick it into the back of your NAS. And again, Synology also does make NASs that have 10 gigabit ports in the back of them already. So you don't need to buy this adapter for everything. Just the DS923 and the 923 Plus both need this adapter. Then once you've got one end, you also need it on the other end as well. So you need to make sure you have a 10 gigabit card for your PC too. In terms of that, like if you have a Mac Studio, for example, it has a 10 gigabit port built in, so you don't need to worry about it. But I don't have a Mac Studio, so I'm actually using this TP-Link 10 gigabit card in my PC. It was cheap, it's reliable, and it works great. I think it was about $100, and it just goes into the PCIe slot on your computer. You install the drivers and you get great speeds, and I find that it doesn't thermal throttle either. Also, if you're using it with a laptop, you can buy 10 gigabit to Thunderbolt adapters. They're quite large and quite expensive, but I think it's totally worth it for the speeds that you can get. Next up, let's talk about accessories. So for starters, I would really strongly suggest a UPS, which stands for an uninterruptible power supply. Now, I have this CyberPower Value Pro 700 VA, which was really, really cheap and is a great peace of mind should your power go out. And it connects via USB to the NAS, and it can actually tell it, hey, by the way, the power's gone out. This is a heads up, stop doing what you're doing and switch off. Now, without this, you could be at risk of your entire NAS corrupting itself should the power go out while it's doing something critical. And also, by the way, I'm going to make sure I link all these things below. So everything that you need and everything that I've got will be linked in the description below. And now next to the NAS, I have a WD 18 terabyte Elements drive. which I use to back the NAS up every single night automatically. And this is an excellent and cheap backup method, seeing as while you do have redundancy for drive failure, it does not constitute a backup. And you should always back up your NAS as well. Now, SpaceRex has an excellent video on how to do this. It does it automatically for me. It does it every night at 3 in the morning. And it's got multiple versions as well and snapshots too. So, you know, if you, for example, delete a file or you want to go back to a previous version, you've got like a history of backups pretty much, which is amazing. It's really, really good. And it means that you're never at risk of overwriting something or, you know, losing important data. Now, in a perfect world, you would have multiple of these backups and preferably also store one off-site somewhere, but at the moment, this is sort of the best option for me and what works for me. Going forward, I definitely will get another one of these 18 terabyte drives, back up what I've got so far, and then store it somewhere off-site. Now, you might also be wondering what on earth that big silver server rack is and how it is part of this entire setup, and that is my entirely overkill unified network setup. So it is granted a lot less complicated than it looks, but it's a Unified Dream Machine Pro, which is my router, and that is plugged into the Unify Aggregate 10 gigabit switch, which gives me 8 10 gigabit ports to plug in up to 8 computers to my NAS and experience these amazing speeds with. So to break it down, I connect the 10 gigabit port on the back of the NAS to the switch, and then I plug the switch into my router, and then that way your NAS is accessible from anywhere in the world or locally at very, very fast speeds. Now, yes, look, I only have one computer at the moment and I probably didn't need the switch, but given that I had the Dream Machine Pro as my router for 3 years, I wanted to stay in the Unify family and get something which also looked really cool, as it was going to be living in my living room. That's also where those Unify OCD panels come in. They're like blank panels that cover up everything and make it look really nice and slick. They are very expensive for what they are. They're like $100 a piece, but they look really sexy and I think it just looks really slick and I love the way that this whole thing sits and looks. And yeah, you could definitely do it for a lot cheaper if you didn't care about the aesthetics, but I care about aesthetics, so I definitely went for the slightly more expensive option instead. Now, I really like the Unify setup for its ease of use and reliability, and it's been the best router I've ever used. I'm very, very happy with it, and the app and stuff is all super easy to use, and it's got the little touchscreens on the front of both the router and the switch as well, so you can see all the information that you might need at a quick glance. But you know, like I said, you definitely don't need to spend this kind of money on networking gear in order to get similar results. You really only need the NAS, the portable hard drive to back things up to, a UPS for sure, and then just a 10 gigabit connection on the NAS and on your computer as well. All the rest of the stuff is total overkill. You don't need this. Now, another thing as well to keep in mind that you will need to be plugged in via an Ethernet cable to achieve the fastest speed. So if you want to plug the NAS directly into your PC, you can do that too, but going over Wi-Fi will give you pretty average speeds, even with a very fast Wi-Fi 6 router. Also, in terms of plugging the NAS directly into your PC, from what I read online, I think there might have been something to do with port forwarding. I don't know if Synology does that automatically. I'm not entirely certain. I also don't know if you can then use it as a NAS or if it just is like a direct connection that way. So for me, I just went with the switch because it kind of manages all the traffic for you and it does everything that you need. Again, like you said, you don't even need this 8-port switch. You can buy cheaper 10 gigabit switches. I think Unify actually makes a really small little white one that you can get as well that just has Ethernet ports on it. So you don't need to get because the aggregate switch has SFP ports. So you need to get adapters for it, and that's just extra cost. It's like I basically went for the hardest method for no reason other than I enjoyed the way that it looks. But yeah, like I said, and I'll put some alternatives as well in the description if you want to do this for a little bit cheaper as well. It's basically the workflow that I have now is it means that I get home from a shoot, I import all my photos into my NAS through Lightroom, I edit them, export them to the NAS, and then they're immediately available on my phone to share with friends or to social media. And backups are actually made without me even thinking about it. So it's great. It's like I don't even need to worry about, before I would always need to be like, oh, I gotta upload everything to Google Drive and then do this, do that. Now everything is all easily accessible. I can be anywhere in the world and I can easily access it on my phone. I can check it anywhere, all that kind of stuff. And there are obviously a host of security concerns as well that you need to take into account as well when you're opening up the ports to the network and stuff like that. Again, SpaceRex has lots and lots of really good content about this, and I don't want to go too deep into it because he knows a lot about that kind of stuff. His videos are very, very good. They cover this very well. So just follow what he says, and you will not have any problems. You know, and then also as well, like when I making these YouTube videos, like this NAS has been an absolute lifesaver for me, because I no longer need to sift through all these different drives trying to find B-roll from a video that I made like 6 months ago to reference in a current video. So everything that I've ever done is neatly organized in folders and is super easy for me to find and drag directly onto my timeline in Resolve. The first video that I made with the NAS was my ranking every camera that I've ever owned video, and that would have been such a crazy task if I didn't have everything at my fingertips. Now, it was already a lot of effort, but I can't imagine how much more work it would have been if I had to actually find the clips in the disorganized mess that I had before. Now, let's talk about the negatives and why this might not be right for you. So, for starters, the price. Now, I've always wanted a NAS for many, many years now, but I always held off buying one because it is the least sexy way to spend $3,500, probably actually even more, because I think that was about $5,000 all up for everything Australian. Yeah, it's a lot. and I initially budgeted 2,000 and it ended up being about 5. So it's always way more than you initially intend. Just keep that in mind. You know, I would always be like, oh, let me just buy a new camera or a new lens instead. And you know, yes, it is very, very expensive, but if you do this for a living, it's honestly worth it. And if you do it slightly cheaper than I did, because you don't really care about the aesthetics of it, it's still going to be just as functionally amazing as well. Being able to have everything in one safe and easily accessible space from anywhere, off of any machine, is worth its weight in gold. That said, maybe you don't have that many photos. Maybe you aren't a pro and this is just a hobby for you. Well, a NAS does also have other benefits that could be beneficial to you, like being able to be used as a Plex server to watch movies with, or you can use it as a music hosting server, or you can even automatically back up your phone and other devices to it too. All things which honestly, admittedly, I don't really use. You can also like use it as a, if you want to like store games and stuff on it too. With a 10 gigabit connection, you can very easily use this as like a very fast external solid state drive pretty much. So there are lots and lots of really good things that you can do with this. It doesn't just have to be photography, but this video really just centers around using it as a photography, videography assistance tool. But also, you know, if you don't need this much space or speed, then a simple 2 to 4 terabyte solid state drive will do the trick just fine, and it will cost much less money. And honestly, you would still need to use one if you go traveling, as you can't, I mean, you can access it anywhere in the world, but you're not going to get those kind of speeds, like 10 gigabit speeds, no way. You can only get them in your own home or office where the NAS is located on a local network. So what I would do if I was going traveling is I would just edit, you know, the stuff that I'm traveling with on my SSD. And then when I get home, just plug it into the NAS, copy it all across, and then just wipe the solid state drive and just move forward like that. But again, if you don't have that many photos or videos, you don't need 60, 70 terabytes of space. You could probably just get away with just using a big external drive. But keep in mind that with an external drive, you still need to make backups of it. And if that drive fails and you don't have backups, then, you know, that's it. you don't have anything else. But I think if you're a professional photographer or videographer, you are doing yourself a very serious disservice not getting a NAS. It really has changed the way that I shoot and the way that I manage my files and the way that I back things up. Because for the longest time, I was very disorganized with the way that I would back things up. I've got ADHD. So for me, like, backing things up and remembering to like do things is a very big weak point. I never remember to do anything. It's just like, I need like all these different systems in place in order to like be able to actually function properly. So having a unit like this, where everything is in one space, everything is done sort of automatically. You set it up once and it's good to go. It just keeps running. It can do health checks on the drives. It can tell you when a drive is about to fail. So you can always, you can change it out as well. So if the drive is close to failing, it'll notify you and say, hey, by the way, the drive is close to failure, replace it. I think the upsides really greatly outweigh all of the downsides. And the great thing that I now know is that I'm pretty much sorted for the next 5 years. I probably will end up adding an extra 18 terabyte drive into this system just to get the fastest possible speeds, even though right now I don't have any problems with it. I can very comfortably edit 4K videos off of it without any issues. But what I will say is that Synology makes the entire process of setting up and using a NAS very, very easy and straightforward. And I'm very, very happy with the performance that I get from the DS923 Plus. Once again, I would really recommend checking out Space Rex's YouTube channel. It's all about NAS topics, and his tutorials are exceptionally helpful in figuring out how to get the most out of your NAS. Again, I am by no means an expert, but I wanted to make this video to share my experience of using a NAS for photography, and I hope that you guys found it helpful and somewhat entertaining. Well, that's all for today's video. What do you guys think? Have you got a NAS, or would you consider buying one? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you guys next week, and have a great day.